Welcome to the Customer Smarts podcast, where you'll discover smarter ways to deliver customer experiences. I'm your host, Justin Stafford. In the last 30 years, there's been transformation after transformation, from digital to data to customer-centric and now AI. The problem I've seen is that many organisations have added new technology and capability, but haven't necessarily transformed how they operate at their core, leading to a somewhat superficial transformation. My guest in this episode is Simon Belosoff. He's spent the last 20 years helping organisations like Bupa, IAG, and Transport New South Wales with their transformation journeys. So in this episode, we're going to explore why some transformations end up being superficial, how to deliver a successful transformation, and the 13 leadership sins of enterprise transformation. Welcome, Simon. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Justin. Thanks for having me on, and I'm excited to be here.
Great. Well, you've worked in the transformation space for a long time. We've seen digital, data, customer-centric, and now AI transformations. However, I've found that when you dig a bit deeper sometimes into these transformations, many have been a little bit superficial. They've added new technology and capability, but haven't transformed how they operate at their core. What have you experienced and what are your views towards transformation?
There is this quote from Albert Einstein that I like to kind of bring to mind. It goes along the lines of, we cannot solve problems with the kind of thinking we employed when we came up with them. So transformation is about change. The extent of your ability to implement and execute change enables how far you go as an organization, as a team, and as an individual. So your ability to give up what has got you to where you are, to go on the journey of what you need to do to become what you can be, is the path you need to become comfortable taking. And being able to change, adapt, and evolve at scale will be a constant theme in our conversation today. And this is where many organizations struggle with when it comes to lasting and embedded transformation, this ability to change, adapt, evolve at scale.
And so that ability to let go of what they know to move on to new ways of working, which I think that's what seems to hold a lot of companies back, doesn't it? So what does true transformation look like to you? If some sort of struggle to get all the way there and maybe only transforming on the surface, what does a true transformation look like?
Yeah, I try to have a kind of this vision in my mind of a kind of a big picture take on transformation. So beyond any platform or kind of acquisition or integration or something like that. So the levers you've got for organizational transformation remain the same. You've got a mix of technology, process, and people that you can change around. So then if I look at transformation, well, you transform because you're not where you need to be. So this concept around a true transformation takes your organization from current state, wherever that is, to this visionary future state that you've developed. And in that future state, your people, the ways of working, the technology, you get into this cycle, I call it a virtuous cycle of having ever higher capability, ever more adaptability, and you're able to deliver ever better business and customer outcomes. It's this ongoing sustainable cycle of innovating and creating value. And when you're there because your customers and your industry and your community, often rather than yourself, see you as setting that standard, being the benchmark and that leader. And all the key performance indicators keep going up and up and up in this great virtuous cycle. Now, if you already happen to be there as an organization, then it's about evolving it and extending this capability or this window for as long as you can. So I go with that big picture vision rather than kind of, let's call it, getting stuck in the weeds.
What do you think are the most important aspects to a successful transformation? You've spent a lot of time on these types of projects. What are the key things you need to get right?
Look, I'll talk through some tips, and I'll call them tips across the areas of approach, technology, people, and process. Really, in my experience, if you use them as guiding principles, you increase the likelihood of success. It's about a balance. So you want to have more of a bias towards these as you go forward with your transformation, because you're going to have some of the other halves that I'm going to talk about, or the other sides. But it's important that the balance be down. I think down in a certain kind of organisation, and I'll just share those kind of with you.
Yeah, sounds good.
So when we talk about, so we'll start off with approach, and with approach, kind of my top tips, if you like, are around, when you set up, are you thinking about a persistent program of change, or are you setting it up as a point in time project? So approaching it as this persistent program where you'll just get better and better at change management, adaptability, evolution, kind of sets you up for the unknowns that will come. Point in time project, it has a couple of things. For one, for those who don't want to get on the bus and change, right up front, they understand that if they can just outlast and endure for whatever the time period is, chances are it'll go back to what it was.
Yeah.
Right. This transformation thing will go away. It'll leave us alone. Similarly, for those who want to change, get on the bus. If it's a point in time project, it's not really a statement of intent. Yeah, from the organisation, the leaders, etc., about this is where we're going and we're going to stick on it. So, I'm a real fan around setting up as this persistent program of change from the get-go. Now, as part of that setting up, there's often models around getting, setting up an external project team or a program team to essentially do the transformation. Again, I'm actually not a fan of that because they tend to be out of the business. And there's that great saying, if you're not in the business, right, you're out of the business.
Yeah.
So I think the real benefit of moving the program, if you like, into the business, there's a couple of things there. One is it's just so much easier to transition to operational BAU.
Yeah. Because
the people in the program are the ones who will run it in that transition to BAU stage and into BAU, and they get time to learn what they need to do differently, rather than Friday the project or the program stops. They do the handover. Monday the operational people have to pick it up, and that's very, very difficult. Yeah,
it works. Does I haven't
no
really because they don't have ownership of it, do they? They don't
yeah
sort of feel connected to it.
They don't have ownership. And one of the things around that ownership is you don't compromise if you need to you're responsible or accountable for it in operational run mode, versus there's a temptation with an external team to kind of just meet the requirement of the project or the program, but not necessarily make it as fit for purpose and not unusable from an operational sense. I have another point around, often you'll have a weighting towards technology and the process side around this transformation program. So then are you thinking, is it the people plus machines or people plus technology? So you're augmenting, lifting your people's capability up, or is it a people or machine situation? And if you go down people or machines, which is really around your primary role or thinking is headcount reduction, so cost removal. Again, how do you get the buy-in of your people when you're, as much as you need to, when you've already, kind of set up front, the way we realize benefits is, this kind of headcount reduction. Yeah. So, that's why I think it's really around that augmentation of people. So it's people plus machines, as it always has been, right? Yeah. See the technology as tools, not as a replacement. And then I'm in the approach, I'm a big one around why you're doing it. And that's so important for storytelling and sustaining of the program, because what we're talking about here is change and transformation is hard work. Yeah. It's going to be a multi-year program. If the storytelling is around we're putting in a new platform, that's not enough of a reason for why across the whole organisation to really get buy-in. If you, for example, in a customer transformation, if you storytell that we're doing this so each and every customer can have a personalized and connected experience whenever and however they engage with us, then you've already pointed it well. It's customer centered. You can tell so many stories and sustain so much energy when it's pitched like that.
Yeah.
So, but often it'll be just a straight platform switch out. And I just don't think that is the best way to, keep the energy up. So those are the ones around approach. When we talk then about technology is such an interesting area. If you look at what's happened, particularly in the last 10, 15 years, the cloud services, software as a service, platform as a service, product as a service, the reality that everyone has access to the latest technology and software platforms.
Yeah.
Now, you might not quite have all the bells and whistles if you're the, solopreneur or the small business, but it's pretty close. And it's really what was called enterprise grade about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So if you bank on kind of just the platform getting you over the line, it's just not going to happen. Everybody's got that.
Yeah.
Then we'll talk about people now.
Yeah.
So, one thing I think is underrated is alignment.
Yeah.
So kind of consensus and alignment from all of your people at scale is really foundational. And you can't, it's really difficult to get a true transformation if members of your leadership team are either, there's always the ones that are for, but then you kind of got the ho-hums in the middle or not sure or whatever else. And then the ones who are really detractors or don't want to do it. And that just flows down throughout the organization. And often what you're trying to do is get people to work closer together, right? To be more of a teaming environment, run it end to end. So, alignment's underrated, I think, but really foundational to transformation.
Absolutely.
It's not about not having challenging conversations, because that's how you get the best outcomes. But if you're 6 months in, 12 months in, whatever, and you're still getting this kind of tension, then you're not going to get it embedded in. So that's one thing to look at. I think it's interesting, if I look at it now, people become your strategic advantage.
Yeah.
Because they kind of everybody gets the tech or can access the tech. And to an extent, the process is visible. We'll talk a little bit more about process and things, but your people are where your strategic advantage is, and they're key to kind of the experience that you deliver to your customers. So in that kind of, with that lens, you've really got to understand across your organization where you really are in terms of talent. And you've got to be honest about what you need to get, where you need to go, right? So where do you uplift and who they are? And it's one of those things where you can be a commercially successful business, very profitable, with ordinary to average talent.
Yeah.
Right? Not every organization can be good to great. Like it statistically can't be, it just can't work like that. And yet you would think, particularly with some of the big players in certain verticals, that everybody has got good to great people, which just it's not possible. So I think it's about being honest with your talent, because then you know what you need to do to kind of uplift or recruit or train and develop and things like that. One of the things I like observing around that is you look at elite sport. I like watching a lot of sport, right? And if you look at basketball and soccer and how it's transformed over probably the last 30 years or so, it's almost like some of the things that have shaped that, you're now looking for those kinds of attributes, right, in your best practice business and transformations. Things like if I look at it yesteryear to today and kind of ongoing, you're kind of in this move from individual players to playing as this collective team, really important. Moving from playing only one role to being basically having positional domain expertise. So you're very good at one thing, but you can play a range of roles. So sometimes it's called the kind of T-shaped individual. So you've got stretch, the one-on-one contest, you move away to this connected orchestration. So everybody kind of dances together.
Yeah.
They can do it at big scale, kind of fixed to flowing, slow and predictable to adaptable, kind of this peaks and troughs to sustain high performance, more multi-dimensional, and certainly rather than having this kind of single fixed way of playing as an organization, as a team, as a function, you almost move to this context-aware pattern of play. So you can adjust essentially on the fly to the customer, desire or need or the experience delivery, and you can do it. And that's a very different type of player who's successful today. And it goes for the talent in your organization as well. So you've got to get better at kind of understanding that.
Yeah, I love that.
And then last one I want to touch on is, man, if we look at process, I mean, some of the key areas there, look, I'm a real fan of customer-centered versus product-centered. Again, that customer-centered gives you some flexibility and some openness in terms of approach and how you deliver things, versus product-centered. It's interesting in some of the transformations that I've been involved in, because they've been kind of product-centered and there's kind of a little bit of siloing and kind of things haven't changed that much. What happens is, if you ask kind of the people, how would you solve this for the customer? The answer they give is basically exactly how they've been doing it.
Yeah.
So they're unable to kind of think outside that paradigm. Yeah. Probably the one way to think about it is traditional car manufacturers think that people wanted to buy cars, but Uber kind of worked out that they just want a mobility solution. And that's a customer versus product centered kind of difference. And that's that thing where if you just think you're there around cars as your product and you're not thinking about kind of the customer deep enough, you'll just get variations of cars. That's all you'll ever design out. Whereas if you think about it from a mobility perspective, that Uber, then they can, again, innovate, evolve, flex, whatever that kind of solution at a point in time is, to whatever is, that can, whatever can be done with whatever the tech or tools or whatever is available at that point in time. So it's a very, very different kind of way. I also think customer-centered is so much more externally focused. So any kind of that, talk about siloing and only one way of thinking, you can start to break that down by getting external involvement, real customers, or potentially, some competitor input or whatever else it is to get out of your internally centered domain. Yeah. Similarly, looking at from the end-to-end journey, it really gives you scope to think about what you need to do and what the opportunities are to make things better. Yeah. If you look at it from a discrete step-by-step, chances are you just improve that bit.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really actually make a big difference from an overall perspective. And I've seen that happen plenty of times. So, and my final one here around process is around evolving your metrics. I think we touched on it earlier, but evolving your metrics and key performance indicators. Because what's really interesting is there are some organizations that have got big customer bases, and yet all their metrics and KPIs are still acquisition centric. Yeah. And it's like, well, hang on, we got to rebalance surely to a little bit retention or engagement, loyalty, retention. And yet, no, it's still as if they were, a green field. We can bring in hundreds of thousands of customers. That's what our focus will be. And that's enough. And it's like, really, so.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always say people perform how they are marked. And so if you have a product-centric organization and they create the customer-centric transformation strategy, have voice of customer innovation teams, all the, I guess, surface level, things that look, visible things that look like change, but don't actually change the KPIs and from the top down, then nothing really changes. That's sort of what I've observed. Is that what you've seen as well?
Absolutely. Those metrics drive behaviors. Yeah. And there's a combination there of, if you've got different groups with different behaviors, you've got internal conflict, right? But also that if those metrics themselves aren't kind of fit for purpose for where your organization is at.
Yeah.
Again, they drive a behavior that is far, far away from kind of the reality that you're facing into and where you need to get to.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's such a challenge, that customer-centric transformation, because a lot of pretty much all organizations have come from that product-centric structure, and naturally the bigger they get, the more sort of I guess substructures sit within the product teams. They end up competing against each other, but trying to then transition that big ship towards being customer centric is it's a massive cultural shift. So really hard to do.
But one thing I can say is that you just get better outcomes.
Yeah.
You get better performance, better outcomes if you actually look into it. The customer centricity is not just for the sake of it. It is really the numbers or the data or the metrics don't lie, but there is a version of fundamental belief, because it's a big shift from a product-centric organization. What's interesting with product-centric organizations is, or what I think, there's kind of the subset where they were the first to market.
Yeah.
So it might have been, if you look at it like a post office, or the first banks, or the first electricity suppliers or health insurance providers, whatever they may be, and there was no product. Then they offered a product, and they basically got everyone.
Yeah.
And they never, and what's really interesting is to, in those organizations, ask the question, who are your customers? And the answer will come back, everyone.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, they're not. Because you can't design or deliver experience for everyone. You have to make choices. Yeah. But it's a very interesting dynamic, because you ask the question and it'll be this universal answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And do you feel like you have to get that buy-in from the top, I guess, for that to actually work? Like your CEO, top down, needs to buy into customer centricity. Otherwise, it's very tough work pushing against that. You can't really drive it from lower down.
It's an interesting. I don't think you can do it top down alone.
Yeah,
it's not enough. So, but certainly the top needs to lead and needs to keep the message right and keep on piece. It needs to go all the way through the organization. And of course, you've got to you've got to hold to it. Yeah. So when the opportunity comes to where you're essentially asked to compromise on it, then you have to not compromise on it. But it's a temptation, right? There's a lot of, particularly in certain, I think, industries or verticals, if you're caught in that never-ending kind of shareholder reporting cycle, you can get this kind of short-term uplift through kind of, bonus offers, right? Buying sales effectively. But it's the sustainability. And often that will run through for a period of time, and then it's just going to run out of energy because you have to keep coming back and doing the same stuff. So that's what you're looking to if you focus around the customer. It's this sustainability and this ongoing high performance, not a kind of this peak and then you drop off.
What are some of the barriers to driving transformational change? Are there some key watch-outs that you've recognised over the years?
I've wrapped my top ones up into a list I'll share. How about I do that?
Let's do that. Sounds good.
So I call them the 13 kind of leadership sins of enterprise transformation. So I'll just name through them. So the first one is really around what I call bright, shiny toy syndrome. So sometimes known as the magic bullet. So that's all the one around the latest, greatest software platforms at all that we need. And you're in this continuously repeat cycle. So that's number one. Number two is executive fear of missing out, or executive FOMO. So this is the one where you go down a pathway of transformation because every other enterprise is doing it. So just because that's happening, we need to have it. And you often see that one play out time and time again. So executive FOMO is a big one. I call number three, I call the Silicon Valley fly in, fly out, or Silicon Valley FIFO. That's where the executive team kind of does this short visit to a leading digi-data tech organization, and like in 2 days kind of has an epiphany. But it's like you can't actually understand how that organization operates in 2 days.
Yeah.
You just see everything they present to you looks fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's not how they really operate. So you've got to have more time than that.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Number 4, I call it the champions of yesteryear. So that's where we've been successful in the past. So you already know how to do this.
Yeah.
And not really thinking through what's different, what's changed, what do we need to get to. Number 5 is the A team already. So we already have the best people with the best capability now. We don't have to build more in new capability. You know, what are you talking about? We're already great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just watching out that one. I call number 6, code your own adventure. Yeah. And this is where your technology or your, engineering teams, if they're in the digital and data space, basically thinking about we're going to build, integrate, maintain as much of the kind of end-to-end technology stack as we can today and tomorrow. Yeah. And even if we take something nominally out of the box, we then proceed to customize it so it's nowhere kind of out of the box anymore, and we have to maintain it. So you have to be very kind of careful around that one because, we talked about light integration and build to evolve.
Yeah.
And if they go off and kind of build their own kind of tech empire, you're never going to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So watch that one. I got number 7, storytelling fairy tales is the way I talk about it. So this is where the narrative internally is so far ahead around the reality of where it is.
Yeah.
And it's this overselling of kind of, where we're doing amazing things or whatever else. And the reality is it's like, well, these other organizations have been doing this for years. Why is it such a kind of, groundbreaking thing for our organization when, I've already been doing it on my personal apps for whatever the last period of time. So there's that one. I got number 8, which is around I call the kings and queens of the royal court.
Yeah.
And that's where the organization doesn't recenter around customers. It remains mostly internally focused, and the attitude being that we know the best for our customers.
Yeah.
And you often see that around, a whole kind of work schedule being organized around all the executive meetings, and they cascade down.
Yeah.
So that you don't have enough time if you're at certain levels to actually get involved and get close to customers. Yeah. Because you're being asked to report up the chain all the time. So, that's an interesting one. If the first kind of comment I think in an organization is, you want to talk to the managing director or the CEO or something, and his or her assistant basically comes back and says, well, you can only do that in about 3 months' time.
Yeah.
And that's because we're just moving through, from where all the board meetings are. We're just cascading down all the internal meetings. And it's like, that's a real show on that's how you're organizing.
Yeah.
I've got number 9, which I call falling for the magician's illusions. And this is over-relying on the capability of outsiders and not trusting in the capability of your own people. So this is where you overuse consultants and external vendors to essentially do your own thinking.
Yeah.
Rather than making the most of them. So having this kind of peer-to-peer kind of conversation or relationship where you challenge what they're saying to you to get the best outcome.
Yeah.
Number 10, as easy as one size fits all. So again, this whole thing around personalizing for each and every one of our customers, but they'll only continue to buy what we offer them.
Yeah.
So really having one product set up, all wrapped up and finished by Christmas is my next one, which is essentially not understanding the timeframes at kind of any level and just going, oh, this is just a 3-month or a 6-month exercise when it's kind of far, far more than that. So number 12 is around industrial mass production thinking. And this is really a concept around we can direct and manage creativity required for innovation at scale and change at scale in the same way we essentially make widgets or nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
because we're at a point in time now where we're moving from that kind of industrial, product production line thinking into this creative innovation world. So really doing things differently around that. And my last one on this one is really around same games, same rules, same outcomes, and just not maximizing the opportunity and just kind of going through this never-ending process of we change a process, we change a tech platform, we change some of the people, but, just expecting essentially the same rules and accepting the same rules, same outcomes, accepting the same outcomes when you go through that process. Just kind of, come on. So they're kind of my 13 kind of sins. Yeah,
they're great. I'm sure they'll resonate with a lot of people. I've experienced, I'm pretty sure, nearly every one of those. I've heard stories. Awesome. Yeah, it'd be great to talk about some examples you mentioned earlier. I think there's maybe only a handful of companies that have, really done transformation properly. What are the best companies that you've seen, organizations? What are the best examples out there?
Yeah, the list is short.
Yeah,
very, very short. So in Australia, Commonwealth Bank, I think, has done a great job on transformation. A lot of it has been around digital or technology enablement, but they've also been able to center around customer. And I think for those who have a long memory or think about things from a history point of view, to think that they were, privatized and they were the government bank up until the mid-90s, and they weren't anywhere near kind of being the leader you see not only in the share market performance, but in all their customer and other KPI statistics. They're certainly the number one bank in Australia. I think it's interesting that they really started with upgrading their core banking platform. So they went straight to upgrading that kind of highly risky piece of tech that was core to their business processes. And they've really carried it through. Again, they're not perfect. None of these examples, it's not the perfect organization, but relatively to where they started from and how much more customer-centric and joined up they are when you go and experience them. I think they're a great example. And they've managed, I think, which certainly the ones I'll give for Australia and APAC, they've managed, even with changes in the executive team and the CEO, to more or less kind of continue with those common themes and the drive of transformation needs to continue. We need to evolve. We're not stopped. But certainly CommBank in Australia, and it's very different when you look at the other banks. Look, the one I'd like to point out now is my global one is really around Amazon. And what's really amazing is that if you think of the online bookstore, which began in 1994, and where they are today, they really have transformed in so many ways. So if you look at kind of where the revenues are now, I think, or the growth, it's not in the kind of that e-commerce heritage that is Amazon, right? It's actually in the AWS, so the Amazon Web Services business. And I think quite a bit of it's coming in their advertising business. And I think what's amazing is Jeff Bezos made a big deal about every year he would have a shareholder letter. So which kind of outlines his ongoing vision for the organization and what they need to focus on for the next 12 months and all this kind of thing. And what's quite scary is if you go and read the original letter, and it's available if you Google it on the internet or anything like that, is that that focus on customer is up front and center from the get-go. And everything that they've kind of been able to kind of focus on, that customer centricity and the way they operate and, being open to innovation, kind of has led them to the kind of the multifaceted enterprise they are today, which is very, very different, and gives them the freedom to continue on and kind of transforming into innovating and evolving. So Amazon's one not to be forgotten about, I think, because they're a very different organization now, and they've only been around for 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, unfortunately, it's time to wrap up. It's been so great to chat, Simon. You've given us a ton of great insights and love the 13 sins of transformation. That was awesome. So yeah, thanks for coming on and joining me.
It's a pleasure. Loved having the conversation.
Thanks for tuning in. Some amazing insights from a great CX leader. If you found this insightful, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button now, as we have some great episodes coming up. And if you have any questions or would like to chat, reach out to us at customersmarts.co. Catch you next time.